Hello, I'm Christine. I'm a mum and a grandmother. I'm a qualified teacher. I'm also the author of many books. My last book was not possibly, but it was a book I never intended to write. Before I go any further, let me ask you a question. Are you concerned about the number of additives going into the food that you buy every day? And if you are, well, then this video is for you. So my latest book is Devils in Our Food. So how did I start to write such a book? There are three main areas of my life that were possibly one of those light bulb moments that you go through. The first was starting to get to know and understand juvenile onset diabetes. And that was when one of our children was diagnosed with the condition. A local hospital offered me a number of different educational programs, which I must admit I just took with both hands. I wanted to know more about the condition. I wanted to know how to work with and help a child manage the condition, because it is a lifelong condition. I hope that will change in the future with medicine going the way that it is. But at this current point, diabetes type 1 has to be managed by the young child, the child or the young adult or the adult that has that condition. So what I learned was about the differences in carbohydrate and complex carbohydrate. Your body only works successfully with complex carbohydrates. And those are foods that have living molecules in them. So yes, you do need protein and you do need greens and you need all those other fresh foods. But when you eat carbohydrate, if you compare a living banana to a bar of chocolate is manufactured and has all of its molecules modified. And in the majority of instances, the molecules, through processing, die. That's a carbohydrate. In a complex carbohydrate, the food that you eat has living molecules and not dead molecules. Now, my book, Devils in Our Food, has been a work of nearly 4 years of cross-referencing, rereading, investigating peer-reviewed medical papers and a whole lot more. So that was my first experience of starting to understand the complexity of food. Secondly, when counselling and working with, as a teacher, young offenders, I became very aware of the lack of enthusiasm and the lack of energy that these young men, and I was working with young offenders, they had committed criminal offences in the community and were now in prison or locked up, or as they say, banged up. And one of the things that was remarkable was their lack of enthusiasm to learn. So one day, and this wasn't intentional on my part, I got to the institution early and was told to, the boys were still in the dining room having their breakfast. So I went over to the dining room, and what I experienced was this really pungent smell of overcooked fats. And sometimes if you go behind a takeaway store, or you're in some part of town where all these cooking smells come together, and some of them are stale, and then you will get an idea of what this dining room smelled like. And as I looked around and I spoke to the boys, it was very evident that they were having mainly deep fried foods. Deep fried sausages, deep fried bacon, deep fried hash browns. And I cannot recall seeing a bowl of fresh fruit or healthy muesli or porridge or yogurt. It was all processed deep fried food. And I had a busy day, and it wasn't until I'd had time to reflect and think about what the boys were being given to eat. And this was on the way home, leaving the institution and walking to the car, and on the driving home, and looking at the boys' lack of energy and enthusiasm to learn, and looking at their diets, and there was a correlation there. So that was my second experience, and these are actual experiences and things that I've started to learn from. So the next time was when a little grandchild came to visit, and it was there wanting a drink, a fruit drink, a manufactured fruit drink at regular times each day. And it was almost without fail. And I had no intention of going out to collect this sort of observational study. So I did teach psychology, and I did major in psychology. So maybe within my personality, I actually observe things and look at the behaviours behind what I'm observing. But these three major incidences happened over 38 years. And it's by bringing these three incidences together and joining the dots. And it's not only that, it was the collection of other information. So when my little grandchild left, and it took my brain and my mind time to process all this information that was coming together. One day I went down to the local supermarket, and I bought as much of this over-processed packaged food as I could from the local supermarkets. And I came back to the house, back to home, and I started reading. And during that time of reading, I took notes, and then I started cross-referencing, and I started looking at as many medical papers as I could find. And I started to become very angry, and at one point I thought I was going to cry, because I couldn't believe that these poisons were being put into foods, general everyday bought foods, including children and babies' food. So I'm no different to anybody else. Over the many, many years, and having brought up children and cooked for probably hundreds of people over my time, I've gone around the supermarket and I've picked up food and put it in the trolley, assuming that this food was good food. And it's only now that I'm starting to realise not all that food that I bought was good. So like everybody else, I would get to the cash register and pay for this food, not realising that indeed in some instances I had bought poison. So it started with 38 years ago, and collecting the information about carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates, then working with the young offenders, then observing a grandchild. And slowly, I put together the book Devils in Our Food. Now, the book is over 76,000 words, and it took almost 4 years to write. And in fact, I'm still collecting information for the next book. And one of the things that has come together is that when you stop and think about it, you and me and our children, and we look at our little babies when we have them, and we nurse them and just love it. It's just such a treasure and such a gift. But what we all have inside us is ancient human technology. The gut, the heart, the brain, the veins in the body, the lungs, the liver are all ancient. And they have only progressed and allowed us to be what we are today because in the past our ancestors ate healthy fish from healthy seas, healthy meat from meadows or from hunting, and they collected the grasses and the grains. But nothing was actually modified and tweaked to make it have shelf life, to change its colour, to enhance its flavour. When we know now that some additives actually are put into foods because the food has no taste. So to enhance the taste of the food, an additive is added. So in some recent science and evidence is the research is showing that yes, we can associate, and we know this, that childhood cancers, ADD, ADHD, and more behaviours are linked to additives and additive colours and other artificial synthetic ingredients that are put into food. But we also know now from science that such things as Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, and like conditions including hypertension and cancers, liver disorders, can also be associated with additives. But some of the recent information coming out from research, and first of all it was done on mice, so it was done in a lab, was the fact of the male sperm, and the tail of the male sperm was shortened by the additives Brilliant Blue 133 and yellow, Sunset Yellow 110 was added to the experiment. And then I believe that then it was human mouse sperm that was added to the experiment, and there were similar results. So the food additive story is a very big story, and we know that technology is advancing. We've got, if our computer is 5 years old, it's considered to be old and it's been superseded. We know that cars, technology is advancing. We only have to look at our phones, and a phone can become out of date so quickly because it hasn't got all the latest technology added to it. So we can't dismiss food technology because that technology is being used in the food industry, and data is being collected about what is the latest, what is the, what stimulates the taste buds, what's the latest in flavours and so on. So we actually need food manufacturers and food producers and food conglomerates to be honest with us and tell us what is in our food. And it's highly unlikely that any of these organisations are going to give away their recipes, because they know, if we know the truth, that we will not buy the product. So it's up to us as people to have a voice. And I'm prepared to be that voice. Yes, I don't know everything about it, but I do know a lot more now about food and additives than when I started out 4 years ago. And what I do know now, there are 3 key questions that we all need to ask of food manufacturers, food producers, and the food conglomerates like the cereal makers and the chocolate makers. So how is this food or drink produced? What are the ingredients in this food or drink? And is this food or drink good for me? Is it good for my family? And until we start asking key questions, nothing is going to change. And already some food additives are untraceable. Their origins are untraceable. And really that's not acceptable. Why should we buy food that is going to make us sick? And it's not about us. It's about our children. It's about our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, because if we don't have and start digging for the truth and the real information about food and what is going into it, what chance have they got? And so it's about us caring and showing that we care and showing that we love. So we as concerned adults need to take affirmative action now. And we have a responsibility to our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. And we also have an idea that, and we do need longitudinal research, how are these food additives, what are they doing to our DNA? Because we don't have the answers to that. So if you find this interesting, please support the cause, the Real Food Lobby, because we need to make a change. Many thanks.